In the heart of Moscow, in the shadow of the Kremlin, Putin's generals had long believed themselves to be in an untouchable glass bubble. Far from the mud of the front lines and the deadly range of HIMARS rockets, they lived a life in the capital's luxurious streets, convinced the war could never touch them. However, Moscow has been shaken for days by Ukraine's destructive airstrikes and sabotage. No airport is safe anymore. No street in Moscow is safe anymore. Every luxury car is now suspicious. Every parking spot is a potential crime scene. Every shadow is a threat to the Kremlin. Look, this is Red Square. People are not being allowed in for New Year's celebrations.
And this is the queue to Red Square from Nikol Square.
Putin cancelled the show and no one was allowed into the square. It's because of Putin's paranoia and fear of death. We used to call this a delusion, but now Putin may actually have valid reasons for this paranoia. Because for exactly 15 days, Moscow's most private places have been under heavy attack. Putin's residences, generals in Moscow, and war criminal soldiers have all been eliminated or targeted in just 2 weeks. Ukraine has changed the asymmetry of the war, and this chaos is now trapping Putin in his secret bunkers out of fear of death. Can you imagine? The man threatening the world with nuclear missiles and apocalyptic scenarios spent that night in a bunker. Or, that's the story they want us to believe. A fear of death is spreading in the capital, Moscow, and generals and bureaucrats are fleeing to shelters. The center of this paranoia, this security crisis, was the great showdown that took place on Yeletska Street on the night of December 24th. Ukraine's targets were not random names, but registered war criminals, under the protection of the Kremlin itself. Now, this is going to be a controversial topic, and I don't care if YouTube doesn't promote it. I'm going to expose the truth anyways. Controversial topics like this one end up getting suppressed by the algorithm, except when you force the algorithm to promote it by clicking on the like button. Thank you. On December 22nd, this illusion of security in Moscow was shattered by a serious security breach. A car explosion on Yasenovaya Street in the capital targeted a Russian general. The atmosphere on the street instantly turned into a nightmare. The area was immediately surrounded by panic. However, the incident targeted not only a Kia Sorento, but also the Russian state's capital security doctrine. Because the name behind the sabotage was not a soldier or a bureaucrat, it was one of the most valuable targets in the Russian army. The brain of the Russian war machine was Lieutenant General Fanil Savarov, the head of operational training, and Putin's shadow commander silenced in an instant. When we look at the geographical coordinates of the incident, the gravity of the situation becomes even more terrifying. Yasenovaya Street, where General Savarov's vehicle was blown up, is only a 20-minute drive from the Kremlin Palace, the heart of Russia, during rush hour. This distance is not a front line in military terminology, but a direct red zone. This trigger also activates the protocol whereby Putin's Kremlin elite flee to shelters in fear of death from a secondary attack threat. So why was this high-value target chosen to trigger panic and anxiety? Although the name Fanil Savarov is not often heard in Western media, he was a well-known implementer in the dark corridors of Russian military doctrine. His career, stretching from Chechnya to Syria and then to Ukraine, ended in the heart of Moscow with a professional sabotage device placed under his vehicle. When we examine the technical anatomy of the incident, what emerges is not an amateur act, but an operation planned with military discipline and surgical precision. According to reports, the explosion occurred at the critical moment when General Savarov got into his vehicle and probably started the engine. This indicates that the device was either activated by a pressure-sensitive trigger or remotely by a lookout nearby. The speed with which the investigative committee arrived at the scene and the Moscow prosecutor's office took over the case reveals the extent of the panic in the Kremlin. Lieutenant Klimenov and Gorbunov, who were involved in inhumane crimes against prisoners in Ukraine, they thought they could hide on Moscow's busiest, supposedly safest streets. However, they paid the price for their crimes by evaporating inside their vehicles. Ukraine claimed responsibility for the attack. The chaos in Moscow is not limited to this. As we mentioned earlier, a fear of death is spreading in Moscow, and generals and bureaucrats are fleeing to shelters. The most recent example of this occurred on December 29th. Can you imagine? The man threatening the world with nuclear missiles and apocalyptic scenarios spent that night in a bunker. Or 91 Ukrainian drones pierced through Moscow's impenetrable air defense walls, reaching as far as Putin's bedroom window. Or that's the story they want us to believe. There are two horrific scenarios for Russia, and both are equally dire. Either Ukraine crossed that difficult path between Moscow and St. Petersburg and entered Putin's residence, which is a security disaster. Or Putin wrote his own horror movie script to avoid the peace table and escalate the war, convincing Trump to buy into this cheap trick, which is a far greater character bankruptcy than military collapse. In either scenario, the outcome for Russia is the same: absolute strategic humiliation.
Why did you believe Putin in that moment and then go say that about Ukraine?
Because nobody knew at that moment. I mean, that was the first I heard about it.
So why not?
He said that his house was attacked.
According to Lavrov, Ukraine targeted Putin's residence with 91 kamikaze drones on the night of December 29th. But what was truly shocking was what happened afterward. Putin called Donald Trump from his bunker in the early morning, complaining like a victim. "They attacked my home."
You know who told me about it? President Putin told me about it. Early in the morning, he said he was attacked. That's no good.
Trump's reaction was even more tragic. With strategic blindness, he believed Putin and scolded Ukraine. Yet Ukraine clearly stated that no such attack had taken place. On one side, an American president saying, "Russia is very generous. It wants peace."
President Putin was very generous in his feeling toward Ukraine succeeding.
While both sides present a picture riddled with contradictions and devoid of sincerity, this tableau forms one of the greatest paradoxes in modern political history.
One more thing that I've been wanting to ask you the last couple of days. So you said that you were really very angry with the Ukrainian President Zelensky if he was the one who conducted that strike on Putin's residence.
I don't believe that strike happened.
Let's now analyze what happened that night in the Valdai bunkers and the danger behind Trump's strategic blindness. We need to examine this incident in all its nakedness, with the meticulousness of an OSINT analyst.
Right. So Putin had said in that phone call to you that that strike happened. You came out and said that, and you believed Putin. There was some criticism.
There is something that happened fairly nearby, but had nothing to do with this.
However, there is a contradiction here. The Russian Ministry of Defense announced that 89 drones were shot down across the country that same night, with only 18 of them seen in the Novgorod region. While Lavrov says 91 drones attacked only the residents, the army says there were only 18 drones in the entire region. This data inconsistency proves that even coordination within the Kremlin is in chaos. Now let's reconstruct the likely scenario inside the residence that night through FSO protocols. As we heard from Donald Trump himself, Putin personally told him that he had been attacked in the early hours of the morning.
President Putin told me about it. Early in the morning, he said he was attacked. That's no good.
This statement confirms that Putin was probably in Valdai at the time. A head of state does not wait in bed when his residence is under attack. FSO protocols are strict. The moment the threat detected code is given, SBP agents physically shield the president and immediately take him down to the underground shelter. The shelters at Valdai are not simple basements, but nuclear war-resistant command centers. However, the issue is not the thickness of the concrete, but the psychology of the situation. While Trump was holding peace talks with Zelensky at his Florida mansion and awaiting a positive phone call with Putin, Putin was being rushed into a shelter on his own soil by his own security detail. When Trump's phone rang, Putin was probably meters underground, his nerves devastated, picking up the receiver with a sense of humiliation. This is a situation of total humiliation for a leader. Imagine a superpower leader making a phone call that will determine the fate of peace talks from a bunker, fearing that the enemy is at my door. If the attack is a fabrication, as Zelensky claims, the situation is even more dire. Because this shows that Putin has become so desperate that he is resorting to the lie that his own house was hit in order to continue the war, playing the victim to escape the table. In either case, the Kremlin's authoritarian mask has fallen, revealing a face trembling with fear and manipulation. However, the real damage occurred not in buildings, but in the West's strategic perception and in Donald Trump's incredible blindness in his view of events. Trump's reaction was a geopolitical tragedy. In his statement to reporters, He confirmed that Putin had told him about the attack and added, "Do you know who told me this? President Putin. He said he was attacked. This is not good. We are going through a sensitive period. This is not the right time for this." When we analyze these statements, we see that Trump is the victim of diplomatic manipulation. Trump accepts Putin's word as proof. He believes the Russian leader is the victim. Even worse, he accuses Ukraine, the side that is being invaded, whose cities are being bombarded with missiles every day, of acting aggressively. By saying, being aggressive because of their aggressive behavior is one thing, attacking their home is another. He is prioritizing the inviolability of Putin's bedroom over the inviolability of children's hospitals in Kiev. Trump's stance gives the Kremlin exactly what it wants, the illusion of equal sides. Yet there is no equality on the ground. While Russia systematically destroys Ukraine's energy infrastructure, Trump's concern for Putin's comfort is a diplomatic fiasco. Trump went even further in his meeting with Zelensky, claiming that Putin has been very generous in terms of Ukraine's success. He said he provided energy and electricity at low prices. This statement is nothing short of a chilling joke for the Ukrainian people. What generosity! The Shahed drones exploding in the skies over Kiev every night, the missile attacks plunging Kharkiv into darkness, or the inhumane conditions in the occupied territories. What Trump calls generosity is Russia's plan to turn Ukraine into a colony. But while Trump lives in this fantasy world, Russia's true face was hidden in the words of Deputy Foreign Minister Ryabkov. At the very moment Trump declared, "We will make peace," Ryabkov summarized the Russian state's official policy as follows: "We will continue bombing until Ukraine becomes a friendly country to Russia. We need to hasten the arrival of that moment."
Русской православной церкви, где есть забота о людях, а не просто тоталитарная и абсолютно.
Similarly, Putin's threats to Zelensky on December 27th, just before the Trump summit, were along the same lines.
На линии боевого соприкосновения. Наша заинтересованность в выводе украинских воинских формирований из занимаемых ими пока территорий фактически сводится к нулю.
A clip from this video will be played. These statements prove that the peace table is a trap. Russia wants complete surrender under the guise of friendship. The phrase, "bomb until they become friends," signifies the end of diplomacy and the beginning of pure violence. Lavrov's threat to reconsider peace talks should also be read in this context. Putin is using the Valdai event to stall Trump and weaken Zelensky at the table. He is trying to legitimize his aggression by saying, "Look, I want peace, but they are attacking my home." This domino effect is being felt not only on the Washington-Moscow line, but also in the Kremlin's own corridors. If Putin was really attacked and fled to a shelter, this is a panic signal for the Russian elite. Oligarchs, generals, and bureaucrats are now asking, if even Putin's safest stronghold can be hit, what is our guarantee? This fear triggers the collapse of the internal front. Faith in the system diminished a little more with every drone that exploded in the skies over Valdai that night. The security umbrella has been punctured, and doubt is seeping in through that hole. Now, let's move away from the tactical details and look at the enormous strategic precipice that this incident points to, namely, the bigger picture. Why does Putin need such a charade, or weakness? Why is he manufacturing such a risky excuse to overturn the peace table? The answer is simple. Peace has become more dangerous for Putin than war. Details leaked from Zelensky's meeting with Trump set off alarm bells in the Kremlin. Zelensky said, 90% of the peace plan has been agreed upon, security guarantees are ready. This sentence is Putin's worst nightmare, because real peace means Russia will have to face the crimes it has committed, the reparations it must pay, and its devastated economy. As long as the war continues, Putin can mask the collapse at home with his external enemy rhetoric. But when the guns fall silent, the Russian people will look in their refrigerators, look at their bank accounts, and ask the question, what was all this suffering for? Russia's economy is like an overheated engine, kept running by war production. Inflation is out of control, interest rates have exceeded 25%, and civilian production has halted. If peace comes, the war industry will stop, and millions of soldiers will return home unemployed. For Putin, this is a risk of social explosion, a mutiny. That is why Putin must continue the war, not end it. The Valdai attack, real or staged, gives him the victim card that allows him to continue. However, there is a boomerang effect here that Putin did not calculate. By telling Trump, "I was attacked," he may have gained short-term sympathy. But in the long run, he also exposed his own weakness. Trump loves power. A leader who hides in a bunker, unable to protect his home, is weak in Trump's eyes. Trump may appear to believe Putin now, even act as his spokesperson. But Trump's loyalty is tenuous. If Putin's victim role turns into a helpless role at some point, Trump's support will also vanish. Furthermore, Deputy Foreign Minister Ryabkov's admission that "we will bomb until they are friends" has stripped Russia of its diplomatic mask. No one believes Russia's security concerns anymore. Everyone sees that the goal is to completely destroy or enslave Ukraine. This situation will further unite Europe and increase the legitimacy of the support given to Ukraine. While Putin tries to overturn the peace table, he is actually throwing himself into a deeper pit of isolation. And the greatest strategic irony, while Putin accuses Ukraine of state terrorism, his own army targets civilian infrastructure every day. The Valdai attack allegation has once again exposed this hypocrisy on the global stage. Russia no longer acts like a superpower, but like a rogue state cornered, resorting to all kinds of lies and provocations, afraid of its own shadow. We are faced with a Russia that is economically exhausted, militarily stripped of its second-best army myth, and diplomatically at the mercy of Trump. The Valdai incident is symbolic of this collapse. Whether Putin was actually shot or is lying, that night Russia's invincibility myth was buried in the icy waters of Lake Valdai. In conclusion, what happened in the Valdai forests on the night of December 29th was much more than a drone attack. Whether Putin really spent the night in his bunker in the middle of the hell created by 91 drones, or whether he personally fabricated this lie to mock the whole world, history will record one truth. That night, the Kremlin's myth of invincibility was destroyed. The deep chasm between Ryabkov's arrogance threatening the world and Putin's fear trapped in his bunker is Russia's reality today. A state forced to either admit its helplessness or lie to protect its leader is on the brink of collapse. The lights that went out in Valdai that night were not just a power outage, but a warning flare illuminating the future of the Putin regime. And this flare shouts, "History never forgives emperors who flee to bunkers, lying to their own people and the world out of fear. The game is over. The illusion is shattered. War is no longer at the door, it is in the bedroom." So, what are your thoughts on this issue? Please share your thoughts in the comments. To stay up to date with